And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines. It's a new week, new round of political contestation. We've just come off the weekend, and of course, there's never a dull day in the politics of Guyana. When we left last week, we were dealing with the news that the authorities in Senegal and West Africa had impounded a ship that was registered in Guyana, flying the Guyanese flag with $5.2 million of arms and ammunition. And we were speculating then as to what all of that means for Guyana. Was the shipment headed for Guyana? What was the government saying, etc., etc., etc.? Well, a lot has happened since then, and we are going to deal with that tonight. Among other things, we expect to have on Amanza Walton-Desir, Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs for the coalition. And we expect her to be on shortly. Of course, the news for today is that the APNU met, and Mr. Granger resigned as chairman of the APNU, and Mr. Harmon resigned as general secretary of the APNU, and Mr. Granger was replaced by Aubrey Norton as the chairman of the APNU. According to the news, there was a meeting yesterday between Mr. Granger and the AFC, and that meeting was held to get the assurance of the AFC that they would stick to the agreements in the Commonwealth Accord. Mr. Granger has finally decided to engage the process. As you all know, I have argued over and over that this has little to do with Mr. Harmon, because Mr. Harmon does not hold the substantive position of leader of the list and head of the APNU, etc., etc. And Mr. Harmon was appointed, and that it is Mr. Granger who has to be engaged. Well, we have seen the first step, and the first step is the relinquishing of the head of the APNU, the position as head of the APNU, and Mr. Harmon relinquishing the position as General Secretary of the APNU. And as I've said all along, those positions were reserved. Certainly the position of chairman was reserved for the leader of the large party, the PNC, and so Mr. Granger resigned effectively today, and Mr. Norton has taken that position. So I think that's the first step. We'll wait and see what happens in that scenario. Tomorrow is going to be budget day. Tomorrow is going to be budget day. And in any country, budget day is very important. A budget, as you know, is really the government spending priorities for the next fiscal year, what is it the government is going to spend money on, and where is the government going to get money from? So it's really about government spending and government acquisition or accumulation of revenues. That is what a budget is about. We've had two budgets since the PPP came to power. One in 2020, a mini budget, if you call it that. And then we had one budget last year, and the spending priorities in those two budgets were geared towards resources for the private sector and the government's pet projects, or what we call manifesto projects. One could hardly call them national budgets because they were not geared towards a national agenda. They were geared towards a PPP agenda. And I'm predicting that tomorrow's budget is going to be more of the same. But interestingly, while we can project what the government spending priorities are going to be, what is going to be new is that the first major outcome of the rushed repeal of the old Natural Resource Fund and the imposition without consultation of a new law is going to be on display tomorrow, because the government has indicated that it intends to fund its spending priorities with monies that are going to be drawn down from that Natural Resource Fund. So they've gotten their hands on the money. They had already borrowed against that money, so they have to fill that hole. And I suppose the rest is going to go towards their spending priorities, which we assume, with much justification, I think, is going to be about their manifesto promises to their constituency. So we're going to see more money going to be poured into sugar. We know sugar, as far as bringing in revenues to the country, is not viable. We're going to see more handouts. I'm sure there are going to be more handouts, and I say handouts because some people are confusing handouts with cash transfer. They're two different things. Cash transfers are policies that are geared towards particular outcomes. Cash handouts are geared towards buying votes. Two different things. Many countries, cash transfers are conditional. One very popular condition is tying the cash transfer to parents sending their children to school. And we've seen in countries that have adopted cash transfers that there has been an increase in school attendance, astronomical, drastic increase. In some countries, we see increases go up from 30% to 70 or 80%. And of course, the more of our children who are in school, the more likely they are to be educated. The more educated the population is, the more highly skilled it is going to be. and the more likely to attract high-skilled jobs. And there are lots of other spin-offs from increase in school attendance. We have very low school attendance in Guyana. School dropouts is very high. I remember when David Granger was running in 2011, 2015, he highlighted that issue of school dropouts. And that is why his program in making transportation available, especially in the rural areas, the interior, for children to get to school, was quite commendable. And so cash transfers are not about giving away money to citizens, as a lot of people will have us believe. It is about making a direct investment in people. I like to say, if you build schools, that's an indirect investment in education. You can build all the schools, but if children are not going to school, you're not improving the education profile of the country. What cash transfers do is, if you make school attendance a condition, you are then making a direct investment to people in their education, their children's education. The schools are now going to make sense because you are giving citizens an incentive to send their children to school. And also, in countries that do cash transfers, we see an improvement in nutrition among children because parents have more disposable income. They're able to buy more nutritious food for their families. And we know that improved nutrition leads to improved health. And a healthy society is important to a productive society. So again, what the PPP is doing, it's not cash transfer. It is cash giveaways and cash handouts with no set outcome. It is just meant to buy votes from their supporters, to buy their silence, to buy their cooperation with the ills of the government. So we expect to see more of those handouts in the budget. And the pet projects like the gas to shore pipeline and all those other things. I dare say that that is not going to lead to national development. We want to see budgets that are geared towards national development. And I believe strongly that budgets should never be the sole responsibility of the government in office. I believe that national budgets should be bipartisan, that all stakeholders should be part of the preparation of the budget, and not one party presenting a budget. And then you have a debate. And then at the end of it, the government just go ahead, use its majority. A budget is a very important aspect of national life and national development. And we need to move to the point in Guyana where budgets are prepared by all stakeholders inside of the National Assembly and outside of the National Assembly. The PNC, to its credit, presented some budget proposals, and we have to commend them for that. I've always argued that part of being in the opposition is not just to oppose, but to propose. And the PPP propose, the PNC propose some budget measures. Of course, Mr. Jagdeo laughed at them. So much for a democratic government. Here is a party a major opposition party offering proposals, instead of embracing them, the president, de facto president, laughs at them. So much for the democratic credentials of the government. All right, so we're going to have Amanza Desir on. I think she's ready, and we're going to talk about that arms business on that Guyanese ship that is really not a Guyanese ship, but flying a Guyanese flag, and the government still not telling us the real story. And we're going to talk to Amanza about that. We're going to talk to her about the budget tomorrow and some other national matters. We haven't had Amanza on for a long time. Towards the end of last year, she was in campaign mode. As you know, she was recently elected to the central executive of the PNC for the first time. And so, there's a time and season for everything. But we're glad to have her back because she's one of the more important emerging voices and personage on the political scene. Amanza Desir. My sister, welcome back to politics. Welcome to Politics 101. I had a short glimpse of you on the picket line on that day when the government killed whatever little democratic hope there was for them. And you all had come out to join the rest of us outside on the picket line, and I had a quick glimpse at you, but I was so engaged. I think it was Kemraj and David Patterson, who I hadn't seen for a long time, and I didn't get to chat with you. But better late than never. Happy New Year. And so you were not one of the persons censured by the PPP. And I said the PPP because it is the PPP who made the recommendation to the speaker, who then accepted the recommendation. And I noticed the committee or the court that they're going to be all before is chaired by the speaker. You have four members of the opposition, 4 members of the government, and the speaker. So the speaker charged them or accepted the charge, and then he's going to be judge and jury. My goodness, you're a lawyer. What is wrong with such a system, Amanza?
Inherently, as you know, you cannot be the judge and jury as well as the person bringing the charge. And so it really is a matter that we are going to explore in its fullest as soon as that committee is convened. So it's something that we'll be monitoring very closely, I assure you.
They didn't pick on you. Perhaps they're tired of picking on you. I noticed they pulled 8 other people. Poor Sherrod. There he goes again. He's in trouble. I think it's just a masquerade, and I'm using that term loosely because I don't want to denigrate one of our major traditions. The masquerade, as you know, is part of our cultural tradition.
Absolutely.
What nonsense is going on in that chamber, Amanza?
It is a charade. It is disappointing. There is no doubt that the Speaker of the National Assembly is now clearly aiding and abetting this government in oppressing the people of Guyana. The National Assembly ought to be the one place that Guyanese people can go to and be assured that their representatives will receive the answers that are asked for, that their representatives will be allowed to speak. You know the etymology of the word parliament.
Mm-hmm.
Parley, speak. It is the forum at which the forum at which the people ought to be able to speak. And what we have is that the voices of the representatives of the people are constantly being stifled. And people may ask the question, well, why do you go? Because, Dr. Hines, we are parliamentarians, and to leave would be to cede ground to the PPP. And we're not prepared to cede ground to them if we have to go every day to demonstrate their non commitment to democracy. That is what we will do. It is important that as an opposition, we be able to fight the battle on all fronts, and Parliament remains one of the most important fronts on which to fight this battle, because I assure all and sundry that all that is transpiring is being recorded in the Hansard. And so it is very important that we continue to go. It is supremely frustrating, I tell you, to have to deal with it sometimes, but we took an oath to represent the people without fear or favor, and that is what we will continue to do. And in the process, the entire world continues to see that the PPPC is not interested in democracy. They're not interested in the inclusionary democracy that Article 13 exhorts. And it really is a group of individuals, a group of bandits masquerading as a government. It is appalling at every turn, the level of thievery and corruption that is being engaged in. The transparency index was released. We've fallen 2 places.
Yeah.
It is remarkable to me that one government could show such a lack of dedication to good governance. They're not even making a pretense of it anymore. Look at the
Yeah.
issue with the school buses. They parked the big buses that former President Granger got as donations in his name, not using state funds, donated to him to put on the roads to ensure that our children had free transportation to school. They park them, they've allowed them to sit there and rot. Meanwhile, they're buying new buses and giving it to select areas. It is not that we have a difficulty with them giving buses to certain areas, but then you park the ones in Region 5, you park the ones in Region 6, you fire the drivers, you have the buses rotting there. And this is the point that you were making about the equitable distribution of resources. The PPP has no concept about budgeting and budget equity.
And you're right, and I'm very glad you went there, because just this morning I was on the Buxtonian Morning Time, and the callers, almost to a person, were expressing their frustration with the Parliament of Guyana, saying, of course, that the opposition should not be in Parliament. For me, the larger lesson there was the way in which the PPP has deliberately allowed half of the population to begin to lose confidence in an important institution. And they're doing that because the alienation that is occurring in half of the population, they hope to take electoral advantage of it. Is a cynicism of the PPP. I didn't say that this morning because I was listening to the callers, but I'm saying it now, that exactly the frustration that our supporters, your supporters, the PNC supporters, the opposition supporters, are expressing in the lawmaking body of our country. It is not by accident. The PPP wants to drive our people there, because the more we lose confidence in those institutions, the more they're able to take advantage of the politics of the country. And I think it is such a cynical situation to be in. And so I want you to I know I've asked you this question again, to talk not just about the role of the opposition in parliament, but the role of the opposition in parliament under a dictatorship. I think that's the question here. Normally we talk, well, what's the role of the opposition in parliament? And a lot of people dismiss and say the opposition has no role in parliament because the rules are stacked against it in a majoritarian democracy. But I want you to talk specifically about the role of parliament under a dictatorship. Over to you.
In my view, Dr. Hines, as I think it was Churchill that said that the role of the opposition is to oppose, propose, and depose. I'm not sure of the order that he used, the
Yeah.
term, but that was the general thrust. I view it differently, not from that, but from the context of the role of an opposition. Historically, it is important. I always believe that when you act, you must act with history in mind. Are you on the right side of history? How will history record you? Will history absolve you or will it condemn you? And the PPPC is making a fundamental mistake that they lose sight of the fact. Whether they care is a completely different issue, but they're losing sight of the fact that their deeds are being recorded. And this is, people underestimate the importance of correctly recording things. The opposition does not show up to parliament. The PPP have their say and their way. We have to show up to make sure that at all times history is properly recorded. Because what is in those Hansards will be recalled 100 years from now when we are no longer here. And so it is very important in the context of history and posterity. It is also important because the PPPC continues to operate conveniently. And what we have found is that they have no answer for the cold hard facts when it is put before them. So again, it is, I always implore our people not to lose patience. You have to play the long game with the PPP. If you worry with them on a day-to-day basis, I always maintain they rule through attrition. They wear you down. And so if you were to pay attention to them on a daily basis, you'd be tired, you'd hop on a plane, you'll move your family, and you'll go someplace else. Because that is their modus operandi. They psychologically wear people out. And they do it deliberately because what it does is that it takes your focus off of them because you are struggling to survive. You are consumed with surviving. So you really don't have time to notice that we've slipped 2 places on the corruption index, that our procurement system is all but destroyed. You do not have time to notice that slowly but surely they are whittling away at our institutions. And I'm glad that you use that word. Because what we are seeing, Dr. Hines, is a consistent, a systematic attack on our institutions. And it is deliberate. The PPPC has no interest in democracy. They understand that the cornerstone of a functioning democracy are strong institutions. And to the extent that they understand that, they have deliberately set about to undermine our institutions. You'll recall that their first act of business was to take away the financial autonomy of the constitutional agencies.
Yes.
That was their first order of business in the National Assembly. And we must ask ourselves why. These agencies are the agencies that are the custodians, as it were, of significant constitutional functions. And the first order of business is to take away their financial autonomy. So their work program is what the government dictates. The monies that they get is what the government dictates. All of that is just symbolic of the fact that they are control freaks that intend to replace our institutions with personalities. And I want to say this, Dr. Hines, because not only it's not even about a detriment to the APN UAFC supporters or otherwise, it is a detriment to every Guyanese. Because when your institutions are eroded, you are exposed. It weakens you as a citizen. And so it does not benefit the PPPC supporters one bit to be supporting the erosion of our democratic institutions. They are simply endangering themselves.
In
The
the long
other,
run, that's
other
well,
in the long term, and the other thing that they have to guard against is that the government deliberately creating a case of the have and the have nots. Because when you do that, society descends into chaos. And you create a group of people with nothing to lose and another group with everything to lose. And so it is for Guyanese to understand, irrespective of what side of the political divide you find yourself, that strong democratic institutions, the rule of law, irrespective of whether it's my government or yours in power, must remain sacrosanct. They must remain inviolable because they are for our protection.
and you are so correct about that. You know, the narrative is that democracy was saved in 2020 with what some people saw as an attempt to rig an election. And so the assumption there is that democracy was formed in place before and that democracy will follow. What we have seen since the installation of the government is anything but democracy. In fact, we've seen perhaps the most systematic erosion of democracy in our post colonial history. And this in a country and a region that has played around with democracy since independence. This government, to my mind, has the distinction of being one of the most, if not the most, undemocratic actor in our post-colonial history. But to do that, one has to redefine what democracy is. If we listen to the so-called jagabats, if I may borrow one of Sherrod Storm's, if we listen to them, democracy is about what happens on election day, regardless of what happens before, regardless of whether this is tainted and bloated, that what happens on election day and what a superpower says they want and what other interests who have an interest in the country say they want, for them that is democracy. But democracy is more than that. It's more than that. Democracy is not just about democratic inputs. It's also about democratic outcomes. What?
Absolutely.
Go right
Absolutely.
ahead.
No,
Go right ahead.
absolutely. I always say that the PPP has mastered the art of propaganda to the point that they would have Guyanese believe that democracy is an event and not a process through which you govern and that you achieve good governance. So they, you notice they have one modus operandi. Whenever they are cornered, they harken back to the 2020 elections and allegations of rigging.
Yes,
And I always say to them, you have the opportunity to put this to rest. Allow the petitions to be heard.
that's right.
Allow the
That's right.
petitions to be heard. So they do not have a pushback for that. They go to it automatically. It is like their life vest. But what they do not understand is that Guyanese are an enlightened bunch of people who are interested and keenly interested in a better life. Guyanese, for the first time in, let's say, 30 years, 27 years, have the ability to contrast governance. The PPPC in its previous iteration was in power for 23 years. That is all some people knew. You had an interregnum of 3 effective years, 5 years, if you were going to call it a term, of AP and UAFC governance. And for the first time, the majority of adult Guyanese have had the power of comparison because they've been able to see the two different things. And the
Mm-hmm.
reality on the ground is, and the sentiments being expressed every day are that whilst the coalition didn't do everything 100% right, things were far better for us under the AP and UAFC. The challenge that we have, however, Doc, is breaking out of the ethnic enclaves that have undermined us since post independence, for all of our post independence existence. Because, we always discuss this very important topic of race. And we always discuss the fact that we, as a Guyanese society, we have to begin to progress to the point where we understand that more is possible, better is possible, because I will vote a government into office based on policies and not based on my ethnic insecurity.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And so
yeah.
there's a role for education, Doc. There's a role for education. There is also a role for Guyanese to play. The biggest stakeholders in our political process is the people of Guyana. It's not the 31 opposition members of parliament. It is the people of Guyana. And to the extent that the people of Guyana are dissatisfied, they must make their voices heard and their views known. I will confess that I'm sometimes frustrated because we seem to be gripped with a level of inertia when it comes to standing up and defending our rights. I keep making the point that this is our Guyana. These are our rights. And we cannot look to anybody else to save us. We must become our own salvation.
Yes, we must become our own salvation. In case you're just joining us, we're talking with Amanza Walton-Desir. As usual, we try to get beneath the surface because far too often our conversations over, about, and around the surface. And sometimes we need to get beneath the surface, get behind the text and get to the subtext, as we would say. Mr. Operator, please unblock Mr. Jaiwan. I don't know what he has done, but he's one of our loyal viewers, so please unblock him. Manza, let's shift gear for a moment. You're a lawyer, right? What is your specialty? What kind of law do you specialize in?
Well, three different kinds, but
Yes,
aviation, maritime,
yes.
and legislative drafting.
Aviation and what?
Maritime.
What do you mean by maritime? For those of us who don't know
It
big
is
words,
the
explain
law
to
in
us.
relation to ships, the high seas, anything marine.
Oh my goodness, you
I
are
see,
God send.
I see where you're going with this.
You are a God send. There is a country named Guyana. You know that country?
Yes,
Last
I
week,
love it very much.
last week, in the country of Senegal, they impounded a ship that was flying the flag of Guyana. And it had a lot of arms and ammunition on it. The crew was a set of Ukrainians. So my little friends them, several Dr. Hines, how come Guyana own a ship that get Ukrainians on it? It then get Guyanese on it. What's going on there? How can a ship be flying the flag of a country and it's not owned by the country? I said, well, I didn't study maritime law. I think Amanza Walton or Amanza Walton-Desir study that law. So I'm going to bring her on the program. And so they're listening tonight. Explain to us how a ship be flying the flag of a country. The ship don't belong to the country, and the ship doing all kinds, fetching all kind of contraband on the high seas and putting the country in trouble. Please explain, Amanza.
Dr. Hines, I'll try to keep it, as simple as possible. So,
Yes,
the ship was flying Guyana's flag.
yes.
Uh, as a nation, in respect of maritime activities, Guyana has certain rights and responsibilities under international convention, largely monitored by the International Maritime Organization. So we would be party to the Law of the Sea Convention, number of conventions on security and safety and the marine environment. Guyana, as a nation and as a state party, we would have certain obligations. We have obligations as a flag state. That is a state to which a vessel is registered. Mind you, it is entirely possible for a vessel to be registered to Guyana, but not necessarily owned by Guyanese.
Mm-hmm.
We have port state responsibilities. That is, you have ports of call, there's certain responsibilities that go with having international ports. And you have coastal state responsibilities. Simply put, as a coastal state, as a state with a coastline, you have certain responsibilities as it relates to the environment and a number of other issues, basically. So, what this does is that it speaks to Guyana's flag state jurisdiction. Registering of a vessel is important because a vessel has to belong to a country. It is important that it belong to a country because certain regulatory oversight functions are expected of that country. So that is how you guarantee order on the high seas and safety on the high seas because there is a nation that is exercising regulatory oversight over that vessel.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, there is a practice of flags of convenience. There is also a practice where countries have set up what you call open registries. The difficulty with these types of arrangements is that it dilutes the controls, etc., that a flag state is expected to exercise and the regulatory control that a flag state is expected to properly exercise over a vessel. You have to make sure the vessel is seaworthy so it
Mm-hmm.
don't sink and kill people. You have to make sure that it's not polluting the environment. You have to. There's so many things to be done, and somebody got to do it. This is why it is attached to a state. Now, what has happened is that the Maritime Administration, from my understanding, entered into an agreement with this IMSAG, International Maritime Safety Agency Guyana body, to undertake certain technical functions on its behalf.
So it's like a third party.
They can delegate the function. One of the functions of the flag state is to have and to register vessels.
Right.
And so they can delegate that function to a body with the technical capacity to so do.
Got you. Got you. Uh-huh.
Now, while they can delegate the function, they cannot delegate the responsibility.
Ability.
What the government of Guyana has attempted to do in this case by that press release is to divest itself of responsibility, which it cannot do. That would be in flagrant violation of their international treaty obligations. Basically, this is what happens when you have a government that has no understanding and no intent on really honoring our international obligations. So, the function of registering vessels was delegated to this company. What I gather is that the MARAD did not do the due diligence
Aha.
on IMSAG. So it turns out that what we did is to enter into an MOU, or what they did was to enter into an MOU with this organization, delegated their functions of registration to that organization without ensuring that they had proper bona fides, etc. So now they are alleging that this is a rogue organization, but it is too late because they did not put in place the checks and the balances. So what you have is an entire register of vessels, we don't know how many, flying our flag, engaged in all manner and sorts of activities. But this is the kicker. We will bear state responsibility for it because they're flying our flag. So when the International Maritime Organization comes to audit us, they're gonna be like, this is your vessel.
Yes.
And this is why it is important that if you are going to enter into these types of arrangements, you have legislation
Mm-hmm.
support it, and you have the legal framework so that you do not bring this type of infamy to the nation. Now, not only has there been a vessel intercepted with this arms and ammunition find, there was also another vessel, we are learning, that was involved in siphoning embargoed Iranian crude in the China Sea, flying to
Mm-hmm.
Guyana. Now, understand, Dr. Hines, the implications of that to major allies of ours like the US.
Yes.
Because this is embargoed fuel, remember, from
Yes.
Iran.
A violation of international norms.
Of so many things. And the vessel is flying our flag. These things, Dr. Hines, are important. The implications are dire for us as a country. But the PPPC believes that Guyanese people don't have sense, that we are unable to reason these things. So you put out an asinine press release like the one that says, oh, this vessel's registration was up in December. When anybody who has one iota of understanding of the maritime laws would understand that you can be issued with a provisional certificate. If your registration is up and you're out there on the sea, the next port that you call at, the international treaties provide that a temporary registration is issued. For what reason, Doc? So that at no time is there a vessel traversing the high seas stateless,
That's right. That's right.
without a country to account for its activities. Guyana is accountable for all of the activities that these vessels are getting involved in. So this is serious. It has national security implications. It had implications for our relations with our allies. It has implications for our ability to pass an audit under the IMO, the III code audit that they do to make sure that state parties are living up to their obligations. So this is serious.
Yes. Yes. Amanza, let me try to put this in some larger context. Look, up until recently, Guyana could be considered a poor country. And so, therefore, some of our neighbors, our sisters in the English speaking Caribbean, they, for example, engage in this, they sell visas to nationals, people who are not nationals, and they make, I understand, reasonable good money from it. But it's a risk you take because a lot of these countries found out that they sell citizenship, they sell these passports to international crooks who then go and commit all kinds of things. Now, the debate is that, look, in essence, nothing is wrong in selling a passport, but you have to understand the risks you're taking. And so, therefore, put in place the kind of mechanism in order to police this kind of thing. Now, with us registering ships that are not Guyanese, I suppose we make some good money from it. Huh? They make a lot of money from that kind of thing.
There is some advantage, yes.
Yes.
Because what it means is that you have the ability to collect registration fees,
Yes.
etc. And anybody who knows about registering a ship, this is not, or renewing the registration of a ship, liken it to you going to get your fitness at the end of the year,
At the end of the year.
but on a far larger, far more
Last year, yeah.
technical scale, which is
So,
why which
yeah.
is why a ship registration is typically 5 years,
Yeah.
because you have to have a ship survey done. You have to, it is a very, very technical task that requires technical expertise. Mind you, these types of arrangements are not uncommon. What is uncommon is that you would have such an arrangement in place without the legal framework.
Yes. 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 Yes, and I think that's the point that needs to be made here. Lest they say Amanza Walton is saying Guyana should not take opportunity to get revenues from registering ships and so on. The point
Right.
is that we are not saying something is wrong with registering ships under our name. What is wrong is your inability to put mechanisms in place to monitor, because it's a high risk business.
The continuation of your sentence would be, because while you can delegate the function, you cannot delegate the responsibility.
And that is the point Amanza is making, and I'm backing her up here tonight, that we don't criticize just for the sake of criticizing, as they like to say, oh, those boys on social media, all they do is cause trouble. What we do here, as we have attempted to do this evening, is to explain to our audience, Amanza, explaining to us, that this is a legitimate business that states engage in. Where our government is found wanting is where they've been found wanting on everything, is their lack of respect for good governance, for systems, and then when they get caught to lie and disrespect their own citizens. And that's the charge we're making against.
Dr. Hines, that is my abiding problem with this regime. That is my abiding problem with them. They're disrespectful to the Guyanese people. Because it's like, I'm seeing something is blue. Everybody is seeing something is blue, and you dare to come tell me that it's red. It is disrespectful. It is dishonest. It simply, look. We had an issue last evening in the National Assembly. A seemingly harmless bill was being brought to the floor to prevent powers of attorney from being used for fraudulent activities, basically. One of the recommendations or one of the provisions said that you have to have two forms of picture ID, both for the person that's collecting the power and the person that is giving the power. In principle, we have no objection to wanting to prevent that fraud from happening. But like I pointed out in the National Assembly last evening, Dr. Hines, after Anil Nandlal carried on about fraud and the prevention of fraud and we must take action, you would believe that they were the greatest defenders of law and order. I pointed out my impatience with their hypocrisy because I brought to their recollection the Births and Registration Act. Remember that? That they
Yeah, I remember
amended?
that act. I remember that act where you rang the bell.
I said to them, these lax requirements will cost us. But of course, you know that is something that they put in place to be able to pad the voters list.
Yep.
But this is how it is now coming back to bite. In that act, what it says is that you can get a statutory declaration from a person of good standing to say, yes, this is Amanza, no, she mother, she born here, she lives so, and that will suffice. With that document sworn, I can go and get a birth certificate. You know, and I know that the birth certificate is the basic document to access any form of ID.
Yes. Source document.
It's a source document.
Yes.
You loosen the bolt here to suit your political purposes. You tighten it here to suit your political purposes, not realizing that you're doing something that is diametrically opposed in the grander scheme of things. Because I could go get somebody from some remote place saying that I am David Hines. I was born here. With that, go get an ID in David Hines' name, go get a passport in David Hines' name, and commit the exact fraud that you're seeking to prevent.
Mhm.
This is because the PPPC has always been transactional. They never look at things holistically, which is why, look, I was most upset, coming back to the ship issue, I was most upset at the Chronicle article that said that the government doesn't have the ship on its register, etc. The government delegated that responsibility.
Yes.
There has to be a mechanism where it is reflected. Another person has come with this explanation, oh, if there is a private vessel, and why should Guyana be responsible for a private vessel? It is a vessel that is plying the high seas. Every aircraft, every vessel, whether privately or otherwise owned, has to be registered
Mhm.
to a particular country. Doesn't matter where in the world it is operating. It has to be registered to a particular country because some country has to take responsibility for that piece of machinery and equipment. So this thing about private and ownership, it doesn't apply. It is simply the government and the propagandists seeking excuses to wiggle themselves out of a situation that is completely untenable. Completely untenable, Dr. Hines.
So as things stand, Amanza, where is that situation now? The boat was impounded in Senegal. I presume they've seized the arms there.
Yes,
Have
yes.
we ever been clear whether the boat was going to ever dock in Guyana? Because you were in all kind of story.
Dr. Hines, you see, what we have to understand is that unlike Guyana, actors on the international scene, particularly as it relates to maritime and aviation, because of the implications, deal in a very high level of transparency.
Mhm.
So, for example, an aircraft, before it takes off, has to file a flight plan that says, I'm going here at this time, I'm going to land here at this time, I'm going there at this time, I'm going to land there at this time, and then I'm going to come back here. That plan has to be approved before it ever takes off. Same thing with the vessel. They got to file where they're going. And so it is possible from that system called an AIS to know where a vessel is going to be. And the tracking information for that vessel said that it was scheduled to arrive in Port Washington on January 28th.
Mhm.
Now, you know that if you were to take the map of the world and you were to draw a line from Guyana going east, it would intersect Senegal
Yes.
on the western coast. And that, of
Mhm.
course, that's the Atlantic
The
slave trade.
Atlantic, yeah, 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 the Middle Passage.
So this thing is not spinnable. We are in trouble.
You're in trouble.
We are in trouble. This has serious international implications. And I have written to the Minister of Foreign Affairs asking that certain questions be answered. We want to know the number of ships and their particulars that have been registered under this arrangement. We want to know when the arrangement was terminated and for the documentary evidence to be provided. We also want to know whether there are any other such arrangements existing. And we intend to have the Foreign Committee, the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Foreign Relations, to be fully briefed on this. This is serious business. This is serious business. Because suppose those arms, those ammunition, the 3 containers of ammunition, they were headed to Guyana.
That's right.
And it's
That's right.
ammunition. Ammunition gotta go with guns. So are those guns here already?
That's right.
Containers of ammunition is quite a few million bullets, if you ask me, based on what I know. So this is serious. The
Very serious.
implications are serious. Have we become now a transshipment point for arms and ammunition?
That is the $1,000 or $1,000,000 question.
It is, because of course it has implications for those arrangements that deal with the non-proliferation of arms and ammunition.
Yes.
Doc, this is serious, and the people of Guyana need to wake up and to understand that with oil we are now playing in the big leagues. And we have to understand that with the touted development also comes the unsavory developments that will threaten our very way of life as Guyanese.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And Amanza, if I may, use some political science here, insofar as politics is a science. um, they are cause and effect. I have argued, and I'm writing a book as we speak. I'm arguing the circumstances under which the government of Guyana, the present government, came into being. The circumstances under which the government came into being have implications for how the government behaves. And the government behaves unlawfully inside of Guyana. And logically, the logical trajectory says that that lawlessness will extend to foreign relations and international relations. So that you cannot have a government being imposed under a cloud, under a disputed election, and you opportunistically take democracy and say, look, put on this democracy shirt, and then call it a democratic government and expect people to act democratically. Governments are offshoots of the people who run them. Government is not something out there in here. They're run by people with a particular mindset. And it is no accident that 18 months into the life of this government, it has committed so many infractions internally. And now it has extended beyond our shores. The recklessness, the lack of respect for the rule of law, the lack of respect for man and God and woman, the lack of respect for themselves and the people who voted for them. That is what you get when you say to a government, the other side is evil and you are good. That is why we are imposing you and we knocking them out. That government, like a human being with no scruples, will then proceed to act like God. And that is what we're seeing. And as I've been saying over and over again, I don't care who cuss me about not saying anything about when Reagan was taking place. I know about Reagan. I grew up in Guyana. I studied politics. I know Reagan when I see it. And I'm saying that what happened in 2020, for the first time, we get a chance now, thanks to that controversial recount, as controversial it is. We have a chance to understand how rigging takes place. That those who are talking about rigging at counting, we now get a chance to see that rigging is not counting. Rigging goes deep into the belly of the electoral process. And I am not passing judgment on that election until we have our day in court. And the PPP, as you're saying, is trying to stop that. And there must be a reason. If you win and you got democracy on your side, you must be very anxious to let the world see that the other side rigged. Let's go to court and let the world see that the other side rigged. You said a rig. Come to court and prove it. The fact that you don't want to prove your thesis and you're depending on some madmen writing in the newspaper about how democracy was attacked. That's your evidence? No, come to court. And if you're not to court, you're saying to me, you get something to hide. Amanza, let's move.
Dr. Hyde, let me say this.
Yes.
Your observation as it relates to the consequences of elections is spot on. Power, government,
Yeah.
simply an amplification of whoever's in government. So if you have rogues and scoundrels in the government, that is what you will have being meted out. And because the world is now a global village, it is impossible to contain that despotism within the borders of the country. And this is why people must be slow to interfere with the internal processes of a nation, because it has implications. You had a country prior to 2020 that was the highest on the transparency index it has ever been. You had a country that welcomed the DEA. You had a country that was cooperating extensively with the US, the ABCEU, in terms of fighting transnational crimes, the narco trade, etc. You had a country that was taken off of the blacklist for money laundering. In 18 months, that has been reversed. In 18 months, you have the largest drug bust in the history of the world. You have vessels all over the world doing all kind of nefarious acts. You have the marijuana bust, several drug busts since. Elections have consequences.
Consequences.
There's a issue, and I always take pains to point out the difference between the PPPC supporters and the PPPC elite. Because Dr. Hines, their supporters are suffering. And what you are seeing is a manifestation of cognitive dissonance. We're seeing that we party bad for government. We experiencing that they bad. Crime is back high.
Yeah.
So the killing start back. We seeing it. But how can we bring ourselves to admit that this is so as their support base? Well, I want to say to us as Guyanese, we have to think and understand that we deserve better. Because Dr. Hines, me being violated or you being violated is you or me being violated, irrespective of who is doing the violation.
Yeah.
Violation is not excusable because it's who doing it. And when we continue to stick slavishly to these paradigms, rather than understanding that we can have a Guyana where if we don't like what you do in the 5 years, you get a vote out, so you had better be on your P's and your Q's. It don't matter if what ethnicity you are or whatever. If Guyanese begin to embrace that paradigm, I guarantee you this country, in a matter of 5 years, will turn around. But because we are so divided, the elite will continue to take advantage of the poor and the working class, continue to violate us, violate our rights, because they know that they can drive fear into certain people's hearts, prey on ethnic insecurities, and have their way.
And talking about the working class, Amanza Desir, tomorrow is election day. Sorry, oh my goodness, election day, budget day. Tomorrow is budget day. Tomorrow is when the government performs what is perhaps its most important duty to the people of Guyana. Presents before them, this is how we intend to spend your money on you, and this is how we intend to get back revenue on your behalf. There is a democratic process that is involved in budgeting. There is also a national significance to budgeting. You know, I always say the best budgeters I've encountered in my entire life are those mothers, poor mothers, who, regardless of whether fathers are in the household or not, they are often the ministers of finance. Because when the money come in weekend or fortnight or month end, they got to figure out we need so much to buy food, to buy clothes, to buy this. This is what we get. How we gonna budget it? And I have to say, I lived in one of those households. I grew up, and I was too little until I get old and went to school to realize what genius my auntie was and all the other aunties and mummies. And so it is, I give that example to say, budget is a very important thing. And so tomorrow, we are going to have a budget for all of Guyana, being presented by a government that does not enjoy confidence of all of Guyana being presented by a government that does not care about all of Guyana, including some of its own supporters.
And Doc, you
Take
you
it away.
must you must you must make the point that the budget ought to be prepared with input from Guyanese. Case in point, the most populous region, Region 4. The Region 4 administration was not consulted on what goes into the 2022 budget. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
They had no say. The REO bypassed them, sending what he thought, and that was fine. That redounds to the disadvantage of every citizen, whether it be from IFLO, whether it be from what you may call it, from Providence, from Better for Acting, whether it be from industry. Again, equity in budgeting and the equitable allocation of resources are important. So here now, you're gonna do all the roads in industry and Cummins Lodge, but you're gonna leave the roads in Pleasance and so bad. What are the implications for the residents in industry? None of that traffic gonna divert and come through with a good road there. Or you do all the roads in industry and you leave the roads in Sophia. The implications are that the cars can drive by you. That has implications for your property value. So you are much better as a people insisting do everybody roads. Do you see the point that I'm making?
Yes, yes, yes.
Their supporters continue to be comforted in the fact that they're getting the other people not getting. Not understanding is when I get and the other people don't have. You make me an attractive target. Give
That's
everybody.
right. That's right.
And these are the types of conversations we have to continue to have with our people. Guyanese people outside of politics, Dr. Hines, are fundamentally an inclusionary bunch of people, are fundamentally a tolerant bunch of people. Introduce politics into it, and it becomes toxic, however. And we have to start the level of engagement that says equitable distribution of resources will result in the security of all Guyanese. But we don't see that.
We don't. We don't. We don't.
Yeah.
We don't. And if
We
I
see
may make a plug here before you go on, thing. Well, not a plug. It's a fact. Former Finance Minister Winston Jordan, when he first took office, I remember, was pleading to parties, to groups, to go and meet with him to suggest what should go into the budget. And I remember the now leader of the PNC, Aubrey Norton, and myself, we met the minister at a certain place where we used to meet up on Saturday afternoons. And we were telling him about some work we was doing. Aubrey was doing work with youth because at that time he was advisor on youth. And I was working, I see Audrey from the Essequibo Coast. I was working in Coffee 250 with a number of community organizations, trying to get them self-sustaining and so on. And we mentioned that, and he said, you all need to come to talk to me. This is Saturday afternoon. He said, come on Monday, and let's talk about how we can incorporate that in the budget. And Aubrey and I went to meet with him in his office. He said, well, don't we have to make an appointment? He said, no, this is important matter. And we went to his office, and he was able to put some of our suggestions into that first budget that the coalition presented. I made that testimony. I wasn't a parliamentarian. I wasn't part of the government. I was working in communities. And here was the finance minister saying, what you are doing, I want to hear how this can be incorporated. But I want to say that about Winston Jordan. I have been critical of the coalition government when it made mistakes, and I want to go on record to say that there were some commendable things that they did. Audrey will ask me, the Dr. Isaac thing didn't come true. Well, there were some hiccups in the bureaucracy, and so those communities did not get what was put in that budget for them. That's another story, not for tonight, for some other time. But the point is that the finance minister thought that budget preparation should include the views of stakeholders, not just in the formal government, but outside of the formal system.
Because that is how it must work, Doc. That is how it must work. Which is why local democracy and local governance is important. Who your NDC councillor is important. It is important to have local government elections because all of it is tied up from the ground up. Input comes in from the villages, into the regions, into the districts, and it feeds its way up into the national budget. And allocations should be made accordingly. But you don't have a group of people they ain't care, them in business. They will continue to throw crumbs at their supporters. They will continue to throw crumbs whilst they rape and raid the treasury and enriching themselves, Dr. Hines. And therein lies the problem that we have. Because I always say this, a rising tide floats all boats. If as Guyanese, we insist that law and order prevail, we insist that good governance prevails, it doesn't matter who in office, the people will prosper.
It doesn't matter who in office, the people will prosper. You know, I always say that there is nothing too complex for ordinary people to understand. That economics and budgeting, the poor people, like I said, the poor women, the ordinary women, and I suppose middle class women too, know what about budgeting more than any one of us who study all kind of big economics. And so I always say we don't have to break down things for people. We always say we got to break it down for the ordinary people. This show is a testimony. They don't have to break down nothing for ordinary people. They understand what we're talking about. The other thing I've always said is that not every educated person is an elite who is not able to relate that education and give it back to people. Thanks to free education from nursery to university, people like Amanza and myself were able to go and get a tertiary education at the expense of ordinary people. And so when we come on a program like this, it's about saying thanks to you, the ordinary people who did not go to law school or university, but you made sacrifices so Amanza and myself and others could go. We are not sons and daughters who were born with gold spoon in the mouth. We are products of the working class that thanks to that policy initiative by the Burnham government, today we can call ourselves educated people. And when somebody like Amanza decided that she was going to do maritime law, I'm sure she didn't realize that one day we would have a stupid government with our country flag flying over rogue ships around the world and not keeping tabs on what they're doing. And that we would need that skill that Amanza was able to get to explain to our people exactly what go on there. To take them beyond the background. How come a ship on the high seas doesn't belong to our country, but flying the flag. What are the responsibilities coming in? I'm saying to you all, do not give up on education. Do not give up on education for your children, because it's not just about education to get rich. It's not just about education to show off that you're right. It's about education for liberation. We come back in your midst and we use that education as a nourishment for you all and for us to lift our community from one level. Let me tell you all, protest is not just being out on the streets with a placard or marching. That is, those are visible forms of protest. But protest is our ability to expose, but also to explain complex things so that we can expose those who are trying to rob us, to thief us, and to take advantage of us. One of the highest forms of protest is education. Education so that we can lift ourselves. And so, therefore, I know that you all are frustrated. I know that you all wish we could get rid of these Jagobats tomorrow. But what people say, two morning. Mr. Hoyt used to say, slow fire. Long before we get pressure cooker. When you get that tough meat, you apply slow fire. Slow fire. And so, Ralph, my partner, this also is protest. And I'm so glad that Amanza is able to come on, was able to come on here with us this evening to set the record straight and to bring all of we on one page. We are one step closer to liberation after tonight. You don't see the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel has an end. And that is what's important. Amanza, any expectations you have from the budget tomorrow?
I expect that it will continue to be a budget of large infrastructure projects that will serve to enrich the friends and cronies, particularly because of the broken procurement system that we have. I expect that they may throw in something to placate public servants, um, or they may not. I mean, the disregard that the PPPC has for the working class is tremendous. And so I don't have any large expectations. A number of super projects and whatever are going to be announced. The difficulty and the trouble with that is that you have in place a government that has a history of failed projects. I want you, out of all the projects in the 23 years that they would have undertaken, what was successful? Sit and critically think about that. 23 years. What did you succeed at doing? What major infrastructure work did you succeed at doing? Dr. Hines, I guess my message to Guyanese is we deserve better. Better is possible. We do not have to look jealously at other countries with their first class infrastructure, their first class quality of living with envy. It is possible here. But we, the people, have to demand it.
Demand it.
Power concedes nothing without a demand.
Frederick Douglass.
And we have to, as a people, demand more. I am so glad that you have said what you said about education being a form of protest. It is why, when you look to societies like the US of A, you would see that it was something that people gave their life for, integration of schools, because they understood that for me to be able to be an effective human being in the earth, I got to have access to the same education that you have. To the extent that I do not have access to the same level of education that you have, is the extent to which I am disadvantaged and handicapped. And mind you, we're talking about books alone or whatever, education in whatever form, whether it be technical, vocational, whatever it is. I must have access equally because you study history and from time immemorial, even from the Bible, what do you see? You always see somebody going out and coming back with knowledge to liberate. And this is exactly what we have to do. Come back into our villages, into the communities with knowledge that liberates the people of Guyana, Guyanese, irrespective of what your hair look like. Because to that extent, man, we can then now begin to talk about this new Guyana, great and free. These dreams and aspirations that Chetty had, that Burnham had, they were for a nation that we could be proud of. What are we proud of today? We are in infamy. We are drug shipment point. We trading in ammunitions. We ship siphoning off oil in the Gulf of China, the China Sea. What is that? But it is so because we the people, we have not demanded more.
We have not demanded more. And so, certainly, one of our call to action tonight is that we have to demand more. Demand more, not just of yourselves, but demand more of the leaders. Those of us who have put forward ourselves, whether we are thought leaders, whether we are leaders on the ground, whether we are political activists or politicians, you have to demand more of us. And we have to be thick skinned enough to understand that your demands come from a place of love. Your demands of us come from a place of love. You have invested in us. You have invested in us. The old lady or old man on the quarantine who used to cross Amanza across the road when she going to school made a contribution to who she is today. The shopkeeper who, when your mother give she mother gives you money to go, she buy fruity and get a short money, but take the short money and she so you don't get your ass cut and home, contribute and also contribute to who she is. Sacrifices that what people made for us. You all demand more of us. Because in giving back to you all, we're giving back what you all give to us. I'm very, very clear about that, and I have absolutely no place in my world for people who get little education and believe the biggest thing in the world. I come from a village. I dare not go back there. From the time I land there, is no Dr. Hines. Dr. Hines is when a day in public, a day on my show, when I land in my village, they call me what they used to call me when I was a little magabai running around Boston. Sure that they keep me grounded. And you all have to continue to do that. Closing thoughts, Amanda.
I remain optimistic and hopeful, Dr. Hines. I grew up under quarantine, and national songs bend the world to me. I have no difficulty with people who may choose to leave Guyana, but I could never leave. I've had opportunities, but there is something about this land. And you see it even in people who have been forced to leave for whatever situation. Home is home is home. And we have to take care of our home. Man, I am first and foremost a Guyanese. I have a vested interest in the success of this country. I have a vested interest in paying it forward to the next generation. We look at movies, Dr. Hines, and you see, particularly in the Western country, a love of country that men are willing to go to war and lay their lives down for their country. That's not superficial. That
Mhm.
comes from a place that says that I am connected to this geographic space and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to defend it. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that her people are given a quality of life that they deserve, that the bounty of this country can afford us. Unless Guyanese from all walks of life, from whatever ethnicity, wake up, unite, demand better governance, demand inclusionary governance to the exclusion of none, we will find ourselves relegated to second class citizens in our own countries. Because, Dr. Hines, of that point that you make, those who are more educated, more versed in the ways of the world, more versed in the ways of business, will come in here and they will take advantage of us, and we will be relegated to second class citizens. Because while we fight for the crumbs that fall from the table, they are up there dividing the pie. But we do not look up long enough from the crumbs to see that more is possible. We are entitled to more and we must demand more. So, my call to Guyanese is wake up, my people, wake up, unite, and demand more for our children. We look at education, Dr. Hines. We got money in the natural resource fund. Why isn't every Guyanese child the recipient of a laptop? Why isn't every Guyanese child the recipient of a subsidy for internet so that they can do research? An educated nation is a progressive nation, but that is not the government's priority. They want to build big roads, so they want to put bridge here. They have mastered the art of distracting us with bells and whistles and bright lights.
Mhm.
Dr. Hines, our people deserve better, but it is up to us to demand better.
Our people deserve better. It is up to us to demand better. Mrs. Conway say, Amanza, nobody go run we. Nobody go run we. That's an old timer because she's talking there about that calypso by the mighty short from Antigua. From Antigua. Nobody go run me from where me come from. Me mama must nyam, me pick the must nyam. Nobody go run me. Amanza Desir, is always a pleasure to talk with you because when you come, you shed new light. There is always light, but you shed new light.
It is always such a
Radiance.
pleasure to speak to you, Dr. Hines. Always a pleasure.
We
Always a pleasure.
truly,
You know, we tend
yes,
to get yourself in trouble one time, but it is always enlightening, and it is a
yes,
chance you have to take to bring enlightenment to our people.
yes,
So thank
yes.
you for having me.
And thank you for coming on. And I
All
hope to
right,
see
bye.
you. Hope to see you soon. Good night. And to
All right.
you, our
Yes.
beautiful audience out there, I want to say thank you. I have to say that I really, truly love you all. There is a love that I have for my people. That love comes from a place deep inside. It comes from my own experience of growing up in a community where we did not have much by way of material things, but we had so much love. We quarrel like everybody, we fight like everybody in any village you go to, whether it's an African village or an Indian village. We fight, we quarrel, we cuss down. But just beneath that, there was always love. Cheryl, my sister Cheryl Glenn from Buxton, you know that love that I'm talking about. There was always that love because that love flowed from a place of respect. And so I thank you all. You all could be doing anything. You all could be watching American TV. You could be hanging in the corner, but you take your time to come here every night, and to stay with us. Together, we can move mountains. Yes, the struggle is hard, but we overcame harder struggles before. And I'm saying, yes, as the Christians would say, they're weeping and gnashing in the night. But what? Joy cometh in the morning, and joy will come back to our faces. We will smile again. That beautiful smile that says we are a free people. And no matter what a government tries to do, we will remain a free people. We just have to fight to restore a free environment where our freedom can flourish. Good night. Gotta go. When you are a bachelor, you got to cook your own dinner. And I didn't eat lunch, so I got to go and cook my dinner. No, I got to go. Tell Sherrod good night. Tell Mark good night. And if you all wake up early tomorrow, tell Kilaki good morning. Again. Bye-bye.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.